But first, let's talk about the past returns of mutual funds and why you shouldn't be chasing it. So Ashish Shanker, MD and CEO of Motilal Oswal Private Wealth, joins in. Ashish, good afternoon. And even though there is this deluge of investor education that a lot of people are now doing, and information is virtually available to anybody, right? Yet we have people asking to recommend schemes without any thought to asset allocation, just the best performing schemes of the moment. Why is that so wrong?
Yeah, so Sumaira, first of all, it's always a pleasure to be on your show. Yes, you're right. In absence of enough awareness or education, I think the easiest way for most investors to select funds is to look at last 1 year and 3 year performance. However, I can tell you that 70 to 80% of these decisions which are made on past performance will end up in disappointment. And this is backed up by data. We update this data every quarter, in fact. So if you look at the top 25 schemes which are ranked at the top in terms of performance last 3 years, invariably these schemes never end up being in the top 25 in the next 3 years. So my recommendation to investors is to look beyond performance. Don't just chase performance. Don't look at only last 3 years performance data. Look at the mandate of the scheme, look at the track record of the fund manager. There are a few other things that you can check before you make your investment decision.
Okay, so let me just read out, in fact, some of the data which Ashish has presented. He says if you look at the 3-year CAGR, the best performing fund between 2015 to 2017 was ranked 132 3 years later in 2017 and 19. The best performing fund between 2014 to 16 was ranked 223 3 years later. So, just goes to show that chasing what is the flavor of the moment may not always be that case. Ashish, we'll get to asset allocation in just a bit, but I want to ask you that why is it that the best performers lag behind and so consistently?
See, there's a very common metric in financial markets, which is reversion to mean. So what happens is that there is a particular portfolio which does extremely well, let's say for 1 year, that 1 year return spills over into 3 years, and that 3 years spills over into 5 years. Now, invariably, we have seen that investors, not just in India, but globally chase performance. So a lot of money comes in when the fund manager is at his peak performance. So money chases returns, but what happens is markets tend to mean revert. So the stocks which were best performing over the last 3-4 years then tend to underperform, and that invariably results into the underperformance of the scheme. Now, the top 25, like you showed, the data is very, very stark. Invariably, the top 25 performers become bottom performers. But even if you, let's say, normalize this data and look at quartile ranks, right? Let's say the top 25% of the schemes, 70% of the top 25% of the schemes in any 3-year period tend to underperform in the subsequent 3 years. And this can be explained by a concept called mean reversion. And hence, just looking at near-term performance can lead to accidents, is what we tell investors.
In fact, Ashish, I was looking at your 20-year data also from 2000 to 2020, which says that only 1/3 of the top 25% funds remain top performers on both 1 year, 2 year and 3 year basis. So how does one select a fund? I mean, I do understand the principle that, past returns cannot be replicated, right? In that sense, I mean, if I'm holding a scheme which has performed well, do I necessarily need to change that scheme because going forward it probably is going to become a dud? Or if I want to even select a new scheme, what do I base that decision on?
So there are 3 things. One is it is imperative to look at the longer term performance and track record of the fund and the fund manager. So don't rely only on 3-year data, look at 5-year, 10-year data. If you consult any financial advisor, he can also show you something called rolling returns, because rolling returns show you how consistently the fund manager has performed. So that's point number one on the performance side. Second, when you're constructing a portfolio, right, you need to choose 3 or 4 fund managers who have different styles and approaches of investing. I mean, we have this fund manager selection framework called 4C, where we look at different styles of investing. So there are fund managers who tend to invest their portfolio based on the value philosophy, where they try to buy stocks which are undervalued. Similarly, there are fund managers who chase growth. So as an investor, you have the choice of buying into 4 or 5 fund managers with track record with varying styles. The third very important thing, Sumaira, is, after doing all of this, you need to set your expectations realistically. So for example, you can't expect, let's say if you have four or 5 funds in your portfolio, you can't expect all 4 fund managers or 5 fund managers to outperform all the time, right? In your portfolio, if you have 4 funds, there will be one fund manager who may not necessarily be outperforming in the last 3 or 4 years. Now, if he's stuck to his mandate and if he's stuck to his style, then you must give the fund manager a longer rope and continue with that investing, because otherwise what will happen is, and this is what we've invariably seen, that people tend to sell out of a underperforming fund just because the last 3 years have not been great for the fund manager, and they then go into a fund where the fund manager has done extraordinarily well last 3 years. Both are wrong decisions, because the fund manager who's not done well last 3 years, in all probability will do reasonably well in the next 3 years, and vice versa. So I think setting expectations and ensuring that you don't expect all your fund managers, if you've kind of given money to fund managers across different styles of investing, you don't expect them to outperform all the time. This is extremely important. It's important to stay through an entire cycle or a journey. Yes, if fundamentally, let's say the fund manager has changed and the style of investing has changed, it doesn't agree with you, or there is very, very high continued underperformance, then definitely there is reason to take a decision. But otherwise, I would say that on a portfolio where you have 4 or 5 funds, it's good to let these funds run if you've done your decision based on some analysis like I explained.
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.